Hey, what's up? It's Jim, and today I'm going to talk about Wonder Woman from 2009. This is one of the direct-to-DVD animated movies from DC, and one of the DC Animated Universe original movies. Probably different from if I was going to talk about Batman or Superman or other DC characters maybe that I'm more familiar with. I'm not as familiar with Wonder Woman. I am a little. She was never my favorite growing up. I wasn't really a DC person beyond Batman, but I wanted to see this because I kind of used the DC EU movies as excuses for me to see some of the DC animated films because I quite like them. And I've heard good things about this. This is probably the best reviewed solo character, I guess, animated DC movie that's not a Batman movie. It seems best regarded. Any list I found, it was like a bunch of Batmans and then this one, or a Justice League in there. But in terms of solo films, this seems to be the best non-Batman one. Or that's how people feel about it. And to be honest, it was a really good time. It's a little convoluted plotting. It's not like maybe the best clarity-wise in writing, but it still manages to be a really entertaining film. Oftentimes when I talk about problems with storytelling or screenwriting, they're mainly complaints, but I think maybe this movie kind of shows that you can sometimes have a good movie despite a script being sort of convoluted in some regards, and then in other regards really work for the character, but then in other points bring up things about the character that maybe we didn't need, but still seem to work anyway. There's a lot of weird writing in this, which I'm not sure is like more DC stuff is like, presumably, and was trying to mimic that, or it's just like what this movie's own riff is. It's a generally good Wonder Woman movie, but not just about Wonder Woman. It's both Wonder Woman and her supporting cast, and really introduces almost all of them to a point where I'm actually caring about more than just the Wonder Woman character. I'm caring about the entire mythos. So if it's going to introduce you to this world, it did it very well, right in time for them to make a sequel, which they never made at all, despite this going over fairly well. It's a little complicated, the plot of this, but basically the Amazons are a proud race, and after fighting with Ares, the god of war, and making him their prisoner in their own protective island, and Wonder Woman is born of her mother, basically from sand and lightning, which is, I hope you guys know that's not how babies are born, but if you didn't know, that's not, just to be clear on that one. And then Steve Trevor lands as Wonder Woman, who's complaining that she wants to go outside and stuff from the island where they all get to be beautiful and immortal, which to be honest doesn't sound so bad to me, but whatever. Steve Trevor lands is like, oh, there's all these ladies, they're sexy, boobs and stuff, and then Wonder Woman has to bring him back, and they have a competition. They don't want Wonder Woman to do it, but of course she wins, and they go to Earth in America specifically, and even give a reason for why she has the kind of very America version of her outfit, because they try to wear the garb of the country that they're going to deal with, which is odd tradition from a country that is cut off from everyone. So she goes to America with Steve Trevor, and is also trying to find Ares, the god of war, before he brings about a terrible war that will destroy all of humanity, and also have some nice social commentary on humanity and man in our current age as well, as Wonder Woman tries to figure out how she fits into this new world, and also how to kill Ares. A lot of people love the violence in this because it is actually very violent, but I think often with these films they're kind of like comic books in the 80s, where they kind of realize, like, I mean, how much of our audience is kids and how much of this are collectors who grew up with this and are mature enough to handle more mature stories, theoretically. And a lot of this is based on the George Perez reboot, which is after Crisis on Infinite Earth and DC all rebooted itself and so forth. After, Batman and Superman had rebooted, George Perez decided to do this great Wonder Woman story, and this is based on maybe the second volume of his reboot, from my understanding. But it's not a direct adaptation. It is more towards an audience who is kind of already maybe into Wonder Woman, but it does a really good job of making you interested in that mythos, and particularly through these battles, which it brings you, it just like puts you in this world. And it kind of sort of feels like, I've heard in other reviews comparing it to Superman 2, with the General Zod thing with Ares and Wonder Woman's mother being like Superman's dad and General Zod and such. And it sort of is that, but it also is just setting up the idea of gods, and the idea of Wonder Woman is a god, and that she, is an Amazon and all these stuff, and that Zeus is there. I think it actually does that really, really well. In fact, the fact that a large portion of this movie, like almost 5 minutes without Wonder Woman showing up yet, you have like all these battles and wars and all this stuff that's incredibly violent, just sets up the Amazons and the world itself before you get to Wonder Woman, which is kind of an interesting idea, because I think Marvel, you have the whole Marvel world, and everyone's bouncing off of this one world. In DC, each of these characters usually have their own kind of individual world, and Wonder Woman, much like how Batman, you need to set up Gotham, becomes Superman, you need to set up Metropolis and his parents in Kansas and all that crap. In Wonder Woman, you need to set up the world that she lives in, and they do that actually fairly well at the beginning. And throughout it, I think they do a good job of setting up this world. Sometimes that can betray this movie. Particularly, there's a part where you have Ares going to Hades to get these bands off so he can do all this war stuff, and you see him have a moment where his son is now working for Hades. And it's kind of a weird moment that you never see Ares have humanity to him, basically. You never have a thing to relate to, but suddenly with his son, you see that he actually kind of, has the feels and all that stuff, and maybe isn't as dark and as one note of a villain as he's kind of portrayed throughout, like, the entirety of the other movie. Does that really go anywhere? I mean, no, but it's kind of interesting. I like that scene. It made me think there's more complexities there. There aren't, but it makes me feel that way. And with the other characters, that really works. When you have Artemis, I think, who Rosario Dawson plays, that I know what the other Amazons like Alexa or Pesipone, I guess, wow, there's like so many characters in this, kind of speaks to how it's trying to introduce you to this world. So its focus isn't, although it's titled Wonder Woman, she's not the entire focus. It's the focus of the world of Wonder Woman. There's parts in the end battle when it cuts to Wonder Woman, I was like, wow, I haven't been with Wonder Woman in like 5 minutes, and it doesn't bother me. It's really good at doing that. Speaking of world building, this film does it excellently well. It does it in kind of a scattered shot written way, and this is written by a comic book writer, Gail Simone, and Michael Jelnick, who I'm not sure who that is, but Gail Simone is a comic book writer, and using various stories and picking up from things, but I think they do a really good job of, this is directed by Lauren Montgomery, of really making a real big Wonder Woman movie and introducing you to that world and setting up where Diana or Wonder Woman comes from and who she is as a person. I was so ready for Wonder Woman 2 after this. I felt like I went through like a real epic journey, and even the battles at the end I could completely follow because I understood the gods and everything going on with it. It was actually fairly smartly written in a certain way. It just felt like oftentimes I was going between so many different things. Like there's a thing with the president, which I was like, did we need that necessarily? It's 75 minutes, but it is crowded. There's a lot of shit in here. It feels like a comic book adaptation, and it feels like you're taking from different issues and so forth. It actually does it like a lot better than like most live action movies do. I haven't seen every DC animated original movie thing, but like I would actually say I think this is a fairly good film, and if you're like interested in Wonder Woman beyond the live action film, which by the time I'm filming this I have not seen yet, but I thought it actually does it fairly well. Kerry Russell plays Wonder Woman. Kerry Russell, this is kind of like before she did Americans, which I think she's amazing in that show, and this is kind of after Felicity, and they kept putting her in kind of more actiony sort of roles in this and like Mission Impossible 3. You kind of come around to her, but she's a little subtler. I don't think that entirely works exactly. By the end, you're so with her and with the film and with the character that I think you'd be totally into it, but at the beginning I was a little hesitant. Nathan Fillion as Steve Trevor, it feels like a little obvious, but it also feels like it's so obvious he's kind of sleepwalking through it. I didn't particularly like his performance. I eventually kind of get more into him. He was kind of like just bridging the gap and doing what he had to do for that character and not as much more. But Alfred Molina as a villain is always great, from Spider-Man 2 with Dr. Octopus to this. I mean, he's perfect to play a Greek god. He's just a legendary, amazing actor, and he does as amazing as he usually does. Rosario Dawson, I wish, would play more roles like in this, as well as Virginia Madsen. But Oliver Platt's brief cameo as Hades is like pitch perfect. Some of the times they'll have people just do a small voice and it's good. Even Tara Strong's good in this. I generally would recommend this more for DC fans, I guess. I assume. Well, I would recommend this to people who want a good animated action movie, because that's really what's so good about it. The action's actually fairly brutal, and you definitely get that the Amazons are warriors and can fight and can do damage. You know initially, right when you get in, that these are great warriors. Particularly the character played by Rosario Dawson definitely shows that very well, but everyone does, and it shows you the brutality that they have to go through and live with, and why they're kind of away from humanity in itself. The violence serves a purpose, but it serves a purpose in a way that shows you why they want to stay away from it, as much as it shows how they're really awesome at doing it. I don't know the character of Wonder Woman entirely, but I feel like I know it after watching this, and maybe I will read those comics, and sure, I actually think they should do more Wonder Woman stories as animated films, the way they've done with Batman and Superman. And I think that would be really cool for the DC movies, because certainly it's a character that I feel like a lot of people don't know the continuity of, and this really kind of introduced me in a way that I feel like I'm almost more ready for the movie, rather than like reading a bunch of comic books. I can just watch this cool cartoon. And DC's always known for their really good animation over Marvel, and I think this highlights how good that studio can be with this. I still think if this was it was still like an amazing achievement in that. I wish that we would would just have more. At the end of this film, I was thirsty for more Wonder Woman. I really was. I was sitting there like, okay, where's the film where she's a superhero? Oh, that's it, because DVD sales were drying up because Blu-ray was happening and streaming was going to happen, so they felt they shouldn't do it, which is sort of lame. It's like perfectly set you up into this world, and any doubts you have during the film will be gone by the end of it. It's truly an epic journey, and one of the things I always loved about Batman the animated series, and particularly DC animated stuff, is I always feel like they're way longer than the runtime, like while I'm watching it, but I don't mean that in a like, oh, this sucks kind of way. I mean, I'm so into it kind of a way. I do get trapped into this. I am kind of following who everyone is. I am very invested in this. Even if the screenwriting feels a little messy, it feels like we're building on characters and building on things, but it felt like I could keep discovering more and more about them and this world, and this invited me in almost perfectly. This did what a Wonder Woman movie honestly probably should do, and thankfully this is not the only Wonder Woman movie we will have anymore, but for a while, since this was the only Wonder Woman movie, I think it did a good job of taking on that mantle and getting you into the world that Wonder Woman and Diana are. So if you have seen Wonder Woman from 2009 and you would like to talk about it, then comment below in the comments and subscribe if you would like to. And yes, the next review will be the live action Wonder Woman movie. I just wanted to do this first.